Shabbat Shalom and Erev Tov. It's a delight to welcome you to Congregation Beth Am, whether you're with us every Friday night or this is the first time you're joining in. It's great to have our musicians, Fred Ross Perry and Danny Scher, along with Rabbi Wattenmaker and Rabbi Weissman leading our worship this Shabbat. I invite you to take a deep breath and let Shabbat envelop you. Maybe turn off your cell phone if it's next to you. Don't let it distract you. I wanted to send a special message to the Beth Am members or Beth Am friends who are part of the Asian community. We grieve with you this week. We know your hearts are heavy. And we certainly hope this Shabbat offers moments of comfort and solidarity and peace. If you have a prayer book, we'll call out the page numbers. If you don't, no problem. You can find a flip book on our webpage or just embrace the words and the music and the liturgy. If you want, we'll invite you to turn to page 120 as our bar mitzvah for this Shabbat. Jonathan Bakash and his family lead us in the candle lightings and the Kiddush.
No, not yet.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu, lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitzanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodesh be'ahava uvratzon v'nchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikra kodesh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim, Kivanu b'charta, be'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodeshecha, be'ahava uvratzon, chinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha'shabbat.
Amen.
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 Well, Jonathan, congratulations. We're excited for you and your whole wonderful family on becoming the newest bar mitzvah, the newest teacher of Torah within our community. I know there's so many people that are excited and thinking of you this evening and tomorrow. The words of Lecha Dodi, our song that welcomes the Sabbath bride, are on page 138. We'll sing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9.
Adonai echad, u'shemo echad l'shem.
like and you're able, I invite you to rise. The words of the Baruch Hu are on page 146. Continue with the words of Ahavat Olam, the words sung by Debbie Friedman, or the melody by Debbie Friedman, on page 150.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam
On page 154, chant the words of Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha ve'hayu Nitzalecha hayom alevavecha Vishinantam levanecha V'dibarta b'am V'shivtecha b'veitecha Uvlechtecha v'derech Uvshofbecha uvkumecha Uvshartam leot al yadecha V'hayu totafot b'neinecha Uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha Uvisharecha Leman tizkeru V'asitem et kol mitzvotai V'tem kedoshim leloechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim Li'ot lachem Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem Emet. On page 158, we sing our song of freedom that brings us back to that moment about 5,000, 3,000 years ago and a week almost, as we get ready to celebrate our holiday of freedom, Zman Cherutenu, our celebration of our season of freedom. We sing this song of freedom that our ancestors sang on the far shore of the parted sea. Mi Chamocha, page 158.
Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Torah
kifad Adonai et Yaakov, ugalo miyad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Kal Yisrael.
Give us a place to rest, Adonai our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. Our prayer for the evening, prayer of shelter and peace, Hashkivenu, is on page 160.
Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu, l'shalom, l'shalom. Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu, Adonai Adonai. Haporei Sukkot Shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim.
Prayer invites God's presence to suffuse our spirits, God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer may not bring water to parched fields, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, rebuild a weakened will. As we enter the Amidah and we lift ourselves up, either physically or in spirit, what are the prayers that are on our minds this evening? What are the prayers in your heart? We'll begin on page 164, asking God to open our lips to the possibility of prayer, and then have some time for our own silent prayer as well.
Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la. Adonai sepatatita ufiagi tiratecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Ya la la la, 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 ya la la la,
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah. El Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'Neihem, Leman Shemo Be'ahava. Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayei hakol atah, Rav le'Hoshia. Mashiv haruach u'morid haGashem. Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim berofech cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishenei afar. Michamocha bal gevurot, umido melech, melech mevit ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל.
170.
אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Continue silently.
יהיו לרצון אמרפי הגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי וגואלי יהיו לרצון אמרפי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי וגואלי. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you. יהיו לרצון אמרפי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי וגואלי.
We now have a time to think of those in our lives who are in need of healing of body or spirit. And so we will sing a Misha Berach, a prayer for healing, asking for God's blessings on those we love who are struggling in some way. It's also a reminder for us to do what human beings can do to bring healing. Even if we're not doctors or nurses, there are ways we can bring healing to those we love. So I invite you to think of those now in your hearts or say them out loud if there's someone who is in need of healing. And we will sing together. Tonight we are especially praying for David Baruch ben Simona, Mason Easley, Marvin Gerstein, Linda Heath, Bernice Leader, Harold Muckamal, Arnie Cameron, Marilyn Sachs, and Nicole Gent Wickenheiser. Turn to page 371 for Misha Berach.
Misha Berach, us the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. We share vera imotenu, for bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
23 Washington Place is just around the corner from the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York City, where most of the Betham clergy attended seminary. Today, it's a rather nondescript building in Greenwich Village, a block from Washington Square Park, and owned in part by New York University in the heart of NYU's urban campus. It's also one of the most significant addresses in American Jewish history. 110 years ago this week, March 25th, 1911, fire tore through the upper floors of the Ash Building, which was home to hundreds of garment workers who worked for the Triangle Waste Factory. These workers, almost all Jewish and Italian immigrant women, worked long hours sewing the shirtwaist, a style of blouse popular in the early 1900s. Late in the afternoon on Saturday, March 25th, the fire, thought to be started by an errant match or cigarette put into a scrap bin, broke out on the top floors of the Ash Building in the Triangle Waste Factory. The blaze spread quickly, while panicked garment workers found fire escape doors locked, a policy that was used to prevent theft, and unreliable elevators in the building. Being a relatively new building, the fire department ladders didn't reach the top floors, and many women jumped out of the windows. 146 workers died in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, some as young as 14. It was the deadliest workplace disaster in New York until September 11th, 2001. The New York Times the next day wrote, "The fire was practically all over in a half an hour. It was confined to 3 floors, the 8th, 9th, and 10th of the building. But it was the most murderous fire that New York has seen in many years. The victims, who are now lying at the morgue, waiting for someone to identify them by tooth or the remains of a burned shoe, were mostly girls from 16 to 23 years of age. They were employed at making shirtwaists by the Triangle Waste Company, the principal owners of which are Isaac Harris and Max Blank. Most of them could barely speak English. Many of them came from Brooklyn. Almost all were the main support of their hard-working families." The Forverts, now known as the Jewish Daily Forward, wrote in Yiddish, "In dark tenement rooms, fathers and mothers, brothers, sisters, grooms, brides, loved ones, with eyes bugging out of their head from searching, waiting for their children, sister, brother, loved ones, waiting for them to arrive from the shop where they labored all week long, waiting for them to arrive, bringing their paltry wages and resting from the week's toil. But instead of them, the blackest news is delivered. They are no longer among the living. Their bodies lie seared, a burnt offering on the altar of capital. To add to the pain of the tragedy, many of the new immigrant women likely would have resented being forced to work on Shabbat. Yet the owners of the Triangle Waste Factory, both Jews, refused to recognize the employees' union, the local branch of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, which might have allowed for a day off to honor the Sabbath. Across Greenwich Village that afternoon, a young social worker named Frances Perkins was having tea. After hearing the commotion, Perkins raced to the foot of the ash building. She recalled, "I shall never forget the frozen horror that came across as we stood with our hands on our throats, watching that horrible slide, knowing that there was no help." A few decades later, Perkins would be the first woman to serve in the United States Cabinet as Secretary of Labor. During her 12-year tenure, she directed the formulation and implementation of the Social Security Act, one of the most important pieces of social legislation in our history. Among other extraordinary accomplishments, she helped create unemployment insurance, the minimum wage, and the legislation that guarantees the rights of workers to organize and bargain collectively. She also established the Department Labor Standard Bureau, a precursor to what is now the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. Judaism has a lot to say about how we treat our workers, a connection that goes way deeper than our involvement in this nation's labor unions and the fight for fair wages and working conditions. As we approach Passover, we retell the story of our own slavery, which focuses on the different physical labors the Egyptians put upon the Hebrews, the forced building of the supply cities of Pithom and Ramsey. The Haggadah tells us, "The Egyptians dealt harshly with us. They imposed heavy labor upon us." And according to Rabbi Jill Jacobs, while the biblical account of the Israelites' slavery in Egypt focuses on the difficulty of the imposed physical labor, Midrash, Jewish interpretation, and other rabbinical commentaries understand the difficulties of slavery to arise primarily from spiritual rather than physical oppression. In rabbinic expansions of the slavery narratives, the Egyptians prevent Israelites' husbands and wives from seeing one another and view the Israelites as thorns rather than as human beings. In the book of Leviticus, which we begin this Shabbat, we are instructed, "Do not oppress your neighbor and do not rob him. Do not keep the wages of the worker with you until morning." Deuteronomy is equally direct. Do not oppress the hired laborer who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your people or one of the sojourners in your land within your gates. Give him his wages in the daytime, and do not let the sun set on them, for he is poor, and his life depends on them, lest he cry out to God about you, for this will be counted as a sin for you. How we treat our workers, how we uphold the dignity of work, how we support and allow workers the opportunity to better themselves is core to the Jewish narrative. Our tradition expands on a variety of different labor laws and regulations, ranging from a prescribed day off to sanitary working conditions to the right to collectively organize. Judaism also emphasizes the value of work. Judaism also emphasizes the value of work. Work is considered a part of a communal responsibility. In the words of Chaim David Halevi, the Sephardic chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, the former Sephardic chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, in the Jewish worldview, work is sacred. It is building and creating and is a partnership with God in the work of creation. Certainly, the importance of work and strong labor laws remain timely. It also remains part of the Jewish American narrative, 110 years after the Triangle Fire. When we think of our grandparents and our great-grandparents, new immigrants to this country who worked in those New York factories and earned between $7 and $12 a week, the wage of the worker at the Triangle Waste Factory. How do we not think about immigrants today who need to exist and live on a $7.25 federal minimum wage? When the federal minimum wage was instituted by Francis Perkins as part of the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, Congress identified this legislation as an attempt to stem labor conditions detrimental to the maintenance of the minimum standard of living necessary for health, efficiency, and general well-being of workers. That remains true today, and we should have no hesitancy as a community in supporting a $15 minimum wage and a living wage. And as we commemorate the devastating fire in New York, we know that even today, sweatshops have not disappeared in the United States. They keep attracting workers in desperate need of employment and undocumented immigrants who might be anxious to avoid involvement with governmental agencies. Recent studies conducted by the United States Department of Labor and the International Labor Relations School at Cornell found that 67% of Los Angeles garment factories and 63% of New York garment factories violate minimum wage and overtime laws. 98% of Los Angeles garment factories have workplace health and safety problems serious enough to lead to severe injuries or death. A few weeks ago, Beth Am hosted an amazing conversation with Maria Marroquin from the Mountain View Day Workers Center. She talked about the impact of COVID on domestic workers close to home. Loss of jobs, declining wages, food shortages. One way for us to support workers in our communities is to use agencies like the Day Workers Center, which guarantees wages and safety protocols for low-wage immigrant workers in our community. Next time you need a painter or a house cleaner, I encourage you to reach out to the Day Workers Center. And while many Jews continue to be active in the labor movement and have deep historical connections to unions like the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, today we are generally underrepresented in union rank and file, who are more apt to be blue-collar workers like hotel cleaners or factory workers. As Rabbi Jacobs asks, the question for the Jewish community now is, given that most of us find ourselves hiring low-wage workers than being low-wage workers, given that most of us are more apt to find ourselves hiring low-wage workers than being low-wage workers, how will we translate our historical connection to the labor movement into our new roles as owners and managers? And while I'm willing to acknowledge some of the corruption, antagonism, and cronyism of certain unions, at least more so than I was when I worked in politics in my early 20s, I still believe that the right to organize is crucial to gaining worker protections. And I'm confident in my belief that it's good to be on the side of working people in their quest for better wages and safer working conditions. As Jews, we should be supportive of union campaigns, be they an Amazon warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, or workers at Stanford or Google or other area employers. One way we can be supportive is to encourage our companies to hire union workers. the triangle fire continues to endure in our memory. It speaks to large ideals in American history: the immigrant narrative, the women's movement, workers' justice, and also the Jewish story. As we turn toward Passover and we fulfill the commandment to remember our own slavery in Egypt, that deadly day 110 years ago remains a part of us. We are a community that uses our past experiences to shape our current reality. 110 years ago, 146 victims. Let us use, as we always have, our collective anguish to create the world we want to live in. We remember the words of the Haggadah. Let us rejoice at the wonder of deliverance, from bondage to freedom, from agony to joy, from mourning to festivity, from darkness to light, from servitude to redemption. Before God, let us ever sing a new song.
Yasher Koach. We turn to page 586 and rise for Aleinu L'Shabeach. Aleinu L'Shabeach L'Adon HaKol, Latet Gedula Liotzer Bereshit, Shelo Asanu Kegoye Haratzot, Velo Samanu Kemishbechot Adama, Shelo Sam Chelkenu Kahem, Vegor Aleinu Kechol Hamonam, Vanachnu Korim Umishtachavim Umodim Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Page 591. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. We enter these moments of remembrance, mourning the victims of Tuesday's horrific shooting in Atlanta. This week, as we begin to read the book of Leviticus and the portion Vayikra, named for God's calling out to Moses and to the people, we as a congregation respond to the calling out of our tradition, the calling out of the mitzvot to free the oppressed and to protect the vulnerable. We stand in solidarity with Asian American and Pacific Islander communities against the rise in hate and violence. We join with the Reform Movement and the JCRC in calling on elected officials to appropriately respond to the surge in violence that we've witnessed this past year. And we dedicate ourselves to better understand our own biases as we work to put an end to xenophobia, hatred, and violence in our world. Tonight, we all mourn the loss of the victims in Atlanta: Xiao Shi-tan, Dao Yo-feng, Delana Ashley Yuan Gonzalez, Hyun J. Grant, Sun Cha Kim, Paul Andre Michels, Soon C. Park, and Yong A. Yue. As I say the name of your loved one, if you'd like to rise in their honor, please do. This week, the Bethlehem community also mourns the loss of Paul Schwartz, husband of Marilyn, father of Jonathan, Matthew, Bonnie, Deborah, and Richard, father-in-law of Tatiana, Nancy, Eddie, and Elizabeth, and grandfather of Elena, Adam, Jasmine, Michael, Daniel, and Gregory. And Donald Frank Dembert, father of our member Heather Rafter, father-in-law of John, grandfather of Alex, Jackson, and Emma. We're observing Shloshim, the first 30 days of mourning, for Frank Burns, Terry Rosentreater, Eleanor Yawitz, Barry Stock, Richard Boyd, and Ruth Zuckerwise. And we're observing the yahrzeit this week, the anniversary of death, for George Abbott, Ina Adler, Alice Amsden, Bob Apfelberg, Peter Batat, Louis A. Bernhard, Nancy Bratman, Florence Charton, Alfred Constant, Evan Morrison DiFilippo, Bonadelle Enlow, Miriam Feldstein, Solon Finkelstein, Molly Friedman, Gertrude Evelyn Gobedy, Ann Goldstein, Seymour Graff, Bernard Greenwald, Harold Height, William Heller, Brianna Sedina Hirsch, Ruth Hockman, Harold Jacobson, Renee Jacobson, Herbert Klein, Minna Steinman Korn, Irving Kroll, Anise Kugler, Mandel W. Cutchins, Nathan Lachtman, Pauline Kors Levy, Alex Light, Jean Lipson, Mitchell Mandeberg, Sylvia Mathon, Marlon Gloria McClaskey, Suzanne Meir, Dr. Lawrence Mendelson, Mark Miller, Elaine Millman, Alla Minkin, Enti Muchnick, Sherry Nagin, Leon Napel, Harry Ornstein, Morris Oshry, Leon Pelk, Albert Podell, Ann Posner, William S. Reiner Sr., Edith Rich, Shirley Roseman, Max Rosenbach, Howard Roth, Jane Rubin, Uwe Schimmeler, Sheldon Seidman, Sarah Sendrovich, Sam Schlien, Reuven Schreberg, Louis Smerling, Vladimir Seufer, Winnie Stitch, David Strauss, Harry Tolchin, Chaya Turkanitz, Lazar Valensky, Irving Weiner, Esther Weiss, Ellen Wyndham, Rita Wood, and Harold Yakowitz. We turn to the words of Kaddish, page 598. Please rise. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah varach leolam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal, shemei dekudsha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiram be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. Together we say, Amen.
Amen.
I'd like to remind you of this month's tzedakah recipient, whose name escapes me, but I'm going to find it right now. The Israel Affordable Housing Center which was established in 2014. It works to develop new tools and advance policies that make it possible for medium and low-income households to secure adequate and affordable housing in thriving communities throughout Israel. I hope you will give generously. You can donate on our website or send a check to the office. I'd also like to invite you to join Rabbi Prosnit in the foyer right after the service with those lovely smiling people. You can bring your own cookies and join Rabbi Prosnit and other congregants for conversation and schmoozing. We close our service tonight with a prayer for peace. Oseh Shalom.
Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al
Right. Reach out and touch the challah. Touch somebody that's touching the challah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Ya la 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 la, ya la ya la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei teva